The verse of the day is Genesis 25:30 through 34. And it says, Esau said to Jacob, I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew. This is how Esau got his other name, Edom, which means red. All right, Jacob replied, but trade me your rights as the firstborn son. Look, I'm dying of starvation, said Esau. What good is my birthright to me now? But Jacob said, first you must swear that your birthright is mine. So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate the meal, then got up and left. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. All right, let's recap a little bit. Who are Jacob and Esau? Jacob and Esau are twin brothers who were Isaac's children. And who's Isaac? Isaac was Abraham's promised child through Sarah. So Isaac is now the father. Abraham and Sarah have now passed away. R.I.P. And so now Isaac had two children, twins, and their names were Jacob and Esau. Isaac is also the one that married Rebekah, who was the story we talked about yesterday at the well, where the servant was contending for Isaac to find a wife. This is the same man, and these are his children. Now, to give a little context on Esau and Jacob, Esau is the firstborn, Jacob was born after. But before both of them were born, God told Isaac that Jacob would rule over Esau. So it's interesting how now we're coming into a story where Esau very much lets Jacob rule over him now by surrendering his birthright. And back in the day, the birthright was known as a very special privilege that the firstborn got all of a lot of wealth from the family and a lot of privileges and rights, and were just seen in a higher regard. A lot of people could say, well, why would God choose Jacob to rule over Esau? Like, what was the meaning behind that? And I think today's verse kind of explains what God knew before we did. And God knows everything, right? He knew that Esau was going to not take his birthright seriously and surrender it to his younger brother. And I think that the story of him being hungry and in his flesh prevented him from really using discernment and wisdom with the things that he was agreeing to and the things that he was giving up. Because how often do you and I do things because we're trying to meet a need? We're trying to get instant gratification, especially when we're hungry. We do things that we regret when we're hangry. And it's a lot of times our lack of self-control that leads us to doing things that causes consequences down the line. This is why God calls us to have self-control. This is a huge reason why God has us wait till marriage, because our flesh wants things out of order, and when it's not good for us, and that causes more pain and confusion and trauma, God has us have self-control and says, follow faith over your feelings, because your feelings are going to deceive you and lead you to be tempted sometimes. And Esau's feelings, he was hungry. He didn't care about what was right or wrong. He just said, give me food and give me it now. How often do we want something and want it now because we want to meet a need in our soul that really only God can meet in a healthy way? And so today's verse reminds us, where are we meeting our own needs in ways that are actually detrimental? Where do we need more self-control? Where do we need to be more patient? I think a really great tool to counter something like today's verse is fasting, because you're starving your flesh. When we fast, we learn how to deny our flesh, to deny our feelings, to deny our hunger, and call on the Lord when we're feeling tempted and weak. And today's story really highlights what happens when we feel weak. As human beings, we try to meet our needs and we try to do it quick. And in that, we don't use wise decisions and we give up parts of our birthright. I think something that I read, which was interesting, is you and I's birthright now through Jesus. We have a lot that we can claim that we don't a lot of times. I'm going to read a long list, but I think it's really good. This says our birthright in Jesus is every spiritual blessing, the blessing of being chosen in Jesus, adoption into God's family, complete acceptance by God through Jesus, redemption from our slavery to sin, true and total forgiveness, the riches of God's grace, the revelation and knowledge of the mystery of God's will, an eternal inheritance, the guarantee of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. We have so many things in our birthright through Jesus now that a lot of times we sell for worldly things, for people, places, and things, because we want to meet our needs now and quick, and we aren't patient, and we aren't waiting on God, and we aren't growing in relationship with God. So we forget what our inheritance is. We forget what our true birthright is. And this is why it's so important to deny our flesh, to learn how to follow the Spirit even when we feel weak. And that's the whole thing, is God's power is made perfect in our weakness. So when we feel weak, it's not an opportunity for us to figure it out ourselves and meet our own needs. It's an opportunity to rely on God and the Holy Spirit, because that's when God can make us strong in the midst of our weakness. I would argue that a lot of our greatest callings in life are in the areas that we feel the most weak, because that's where God will show up the most. That's where you're going to need God the most. When it comes to God's plan for our life, I think a lot of times He gives us callings that we feel incapable to meet in our own strength, which is a blessing, because we're going to need God every step of the way. We're going to need God to make us strong in all of our weak places, which just gives God that much more glory and becomes a massive testimony that other people in the world can see and be encouraged by. I think the end of verse 34 speaks to that. It says, he showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. Esau showed contempt for his rights. How often do we show contempt in our relationship with Jesus, and how we follow what God says, and we compromise? And this is how we become lukewarm. We believe, but we don't actually follow. We can believe in God, but do we believe what God says is true through the way that we live our life? Because how we live our life speaks to how much we believe God, not how much we believe in God, because you can believe in God and not believe what He says through you choosing to be the leader of your own life. The fruit of our life and how we live our life is evidence of our true faith. It's not what qualifies our faith. All that qualifies your faith is believing in Jesus, but then you have a responsibility to continue growing in relationship and obeying what He says, and that will bear the fruit of the Holy Spirit and protect you from surrendering your birthright, all the rights that you have through Jesus, and protect you from growing contempt in your relationship with Jesus. This will teach you how to choose faith over your feelings. And fasting, I would encourage everyone to try fasting when you're feeling out of control in your flesh, because it teaches you how to surrender your flesh, rely on the Holy Spirit, and show you that you really are capable of denying the things and denying your flesh when it feels like you can't sometimes. The point of fasting is you get hungry, right? So you have hunger pains. The pains are supposed to help you pay attention to turning your eyes to Jesus when you're weak, so that He can make you strong in your weakness. Every single time I fasted in my life, it has helped me grow in confidence in my ability to deny my flesh, to deny temptation, and to rely on the power of God to make me strong in my weakness. So do that. Don't sell your birthright. Patience, faith over feelings. Okay?